We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, this is Marlon Detweiler, and you're here for the next session of Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Today we have with us Paul McNulty from Grove City College. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, it's good to be with you.
It is so good to have you here. I don't know if I imagine you do know this, but there have been a lot of students from our online school come to Grove City. In fact, I believe 1 year we had at least 10 graduates come to school there. Are you familiar with that? And
I am familiar with that. I'm not sure I know the numbers every year, but I know that when I talk to incoming freshmen and students around campus, and we get into their backgrounds, Veritas comes up not infrequently. So I greatly appreciate the fact that that's a thread that is running through our community here, and it's prepared those students very well.
That is wonderful. Tell us about Grove City College in general, and then I'll ask some more questions about it, but I want to hear some general thoughts.
Sure. Well, Grove City College sits here in Western Pennsylvania, about an hour's drive north of Pittsburgh. A beautiful rural spot. We're one of the more beautiful campuses in the country, just in terms of the physical layout and the conscientiousness of the leaders of the college over 150 years to really be intentional about the way in which the place looks, so that students can actually have a home away from home where they can learn well. But more importantly, we're a school of over 2,000 students. We are a Christian, Christ-centered in our mission. We are a Christian liberal arts college. And we also have a heavy emphasis on STEM. So we are about 50-50 in terms of our students being in various liberal arts degree programs. And then about 50%, as I say, are in the STEM side of the school, a large engineering program that is very successful, for example. We have been around for about 150 years, and I'm only the 9th president in that period of time. So there's a lot of continuity in the leadership.
There's a good bit of stability in that.
That's right. And only 8 board chairs during that period of time, too.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So we don't take any federal funding. We're independent. We're one of the, dozen schools or so in the country. But we were one of the ones that kind of led the way, along with Hillsdale, to assert our independence from the federal authorities when they started tying control to student financial assistance, which was what we went to the Supreme Court to fight. We are a school that is relatively low cost. We're roughly about half the tuition price of our competitors. And so we're really conscientious about stewardship. We don't spend a lot of money on administrative staff and, sort of politically correct programs and things that, build up a lot of costs for students. And we don't discount it at all. So what we charge is our price, but we have funded financial aid. And we are right now awarding our students about $10 million of financial aid each year. That's all funded through the generous support of alums and friends of the college.
That is wonderful. And I've known of all of those things, and it's been a real appeal to the broader Christian community. What is it you think, though, is the specific appeal to classically educated kids like the kids that come through Veritas?
Well, I think it's because our curricula is actually a pretty classical oriented curricula. So, for example, we have a humanities core that requires our students to take 15 hours of humanities courses that cover scripture, history, all Western civilization focused beyond the biblical revelation course, but civilization and the arts, civilization and literature. And then we have a capstone course on worldview. And that core alone, I think, is very appealing to families that have worked hard to try to build a Christian worldview in the minds and hearts of their children, and they're looking for a place where that's going to be built upon and not deconstructed. And so that, along with some really strong programs in English and history and economics, they tend to appeal to students who are classically educated.
Yeah, yeah, it's really true. There's another thing that is true of Grove City that I've heard from a number of graduates, and that is it is a college that probably on a per capita basis provides more spouses than any other college in America. The idea that when you go there, it's a very likely place, statistically speaking, that you're going to meet your spouse there. I'd like to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Well, guilty as charged because I met my spouse here. And so
there you go.
My wife and I were married for 42 years almost. And we met here at Grove City. And in fact, the board chair, he and his wife met at Grove City College. So it is true. We call it ring by spring. And I guess it's because, we're an entirely residential college. So for 4 years, students live in our dormitories, 2,000 students, as I say. So it's a significant size community, but it's a community that's very tight because we don't have off-campus housing and people aren't very transactional coming and going. They're really engaged. And as a result, relationships get built. And I think more and more students appreciate that this is a place where you're going to find kindred spirits, people who are seeing the world the same way. And I know in my own case, my wife and I have had a wonderful journey. We've had together we've faced real difficulties in our lives, but because we were united in our faith and in our love for each other that grew from here, we've faced them together, and it's made our marriage stronger and stronger. So I do think there's something said for that. I will say, though, that for the students who are leaving here without having found their spouse, we want to make sure they don't feel like that life is over. And the reality is that they'll go on, and in God's sweet providence, they'll meet someone, and everything will be fine. I had 2 daughters who came to Grove City. They did not get engaged to Grovers while they were here, and they're both happily married with children. And God is good. So
you're sounding a bit
there's 2
defensive right
sides to
now. You're just I'm calling you out on it. You're sounding defensive. No,
well,
that's a good word.
I'm sounding like a father and a pastor of students who
Yeah.
have different reactions to these things. So yeah, that's I guess it.
That's great. Oh, that's great. Well, it has probably never been the case in our lifetime that we have had colleges have the kinds of challenges that they have been attending to. And when I speak of colleges attending to them in general, of course, I'm talking colleges broadly speaking, all colleges in America. And I mean, I am old enough to remember the turmoil of the 60s in colleges. I wasn't old enough to have been there for it. I graduated college in 78. My sister graduated college in about 74, 73, something like that. And so her high school year, she graduated from high school in 1969. I kind of got a chance to watch things happen, sexual revolution and Vietnam and other things, mostly through my older sisters being more in the middle of it than me. And that was a time that we are prone to forget or not really realize how significant it was. But I don't think it's as significant as some of the things going on today. And what I'm referring to, of course, is discussions around gender, discussions around racism and racial issues, and woke culture categories in general. I'm curious if you think we've come to a new high watermark in trouble at college.
Well, I do think there's something to your theory there. And while we know that there are cycles within history and by God's wonderful providence, there are, rebirths and there's renewal and so forth, I do think we are at a point that's different because primarily what you described in the 60s was a battle within modernity. In other words, we were in a period of time where truth was at least seen as objective, and therefore people were pushing against that, and they were being countercultural. But the culture has largely accepted the idea that there is a creator God and that he has revealed himself, and there is truth, there is true truth. Today, we are far removed from that. Today, we are living, and it's an overused term, but it's true. We're in a postmodern, we're in a post-truth time. And so what we see in scholars at these institutions are people who reject the notion of absolutes, of any sort of transcendent voice or authority, creative work, and therefore they're prepared to challenge all sort of understandings, all sort of settled ideas, because those ideas from their perspective are just constructs. They're not really rooted in something that is a God controlled movement of history that has significance and objective reality to it.
Yeah.
And that difference is huge.
Yeah,
and it means that they're prepared to, again, this whole idea of my truth, I mean, that would have been nonsense if you said that a decade ago. And today it's actually common language to refer to truth in an entirely relativistic sense.
Yeah. The conversation isn't new, but it's taken a new form of acceptance and expectation like has never been in my lifetime. Anyway,
right.
Let's bear down on some of these topics a little bit specifically, and then maybe come back at a higher level and ask you to prognosticate about the near-term future. How are you handling at Grove City gender issues? What does your statement of faith say? What are your practices, and how are you interacting with the student population to say this is who we are? And you're welcome to be here if you're not like that, but you got to operate according to what we are, I assume, is one of the ways you operate.
That's right. Well, we have a clear articulation of what we stand for in terms of our Christian identity, our fidelity to God's word, our long history of that. So anyone who comes to work here or study here is well aware of the fact that we're explicit about who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. So that's the foundation that an institution has to have. We don't require students to sign a statement of faith. We've stayed away from that over our long decades because we're not sure if that actually accomplishes a whole lot. And we instead try to set up our community in such a way that we can live by our explicit statement of what we believe. So we don't have, for example, any official groups on campus that are affirming the LGBTQ agenda. Now, students are, because we are 2,000 plus students can get together and talk about what they want to talk about.
Right.
But there's a big difference in our campus life between being an official organization and being able to do the things an official organization can do, and just students who are seeking to gather together and have conversations. And so we watch it closely in terms of how that might be circumvented, and we try to manage as best we can, and still at the same time allow for pathways for conversation among adult people who are in all different sort of places in their lives. We recognize that, and they're going to have conversations just like our students are going to have everywhere they go in the world beyond campus life. But if we come across, of course, an issue that is challenging our commitments as a Christian organization, then we have a whole series of steps we can take with our student life office to address that. And we try to address that in a loving way, but one that stays very committed to our core principles. And I'm a lawyer, so I use language sometimes like, and we deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but that's actually just biblical wisdom for the idea that there are facts and circumstances associated with every situation. You've got to know them, you've got to handle them according to that situation's and what's wise in it.
Is there any difference as to how you handle some of the contemporary charged areas of the racial discussion?
Sure. I mean, difference in the sense that the sexual ethics issues get into more basic things about a student organization and so forth. But when dealing with the subject of race, there's certainly an important concern associated with critical race theory. And we've had our own issues there in the past year that we've had to address when there is a question raised about whether or not someone is supporting that or in some way or another speaking to that. And our board and myself and others have been clear about where we want to make sure we draw the line there. And we're not promoting a Marxist doctrine as CRT is. At the same time, as I said all along here, there is a difference between the deconstructing work that so many institutions are doing and preparing students. And so in the right context, within the confines of a classroom, where professors are with students throughout the week and throughout the semester, and they're able to provide materials that they can read and then discuss together, that's the context we want the controversial, difficult ideas to be hashed out so that students understand them. And they're not leaving here and for the first time learning about something and then wondering, why did my college even prepare me to critique that or understand the flaws in that particular theory?
Yeah, that's really good. The woke culture in general gets after the college community in a pretty aggressive way. Have you experienced it much? Have you had are there some concrete examples of how you've had to deal directly with those challenges?
Well, I mean, the idea of woke culture is a broad term, and there's, perhaps
you're right.
Again,
feel free to tighten it up.
You have to kind of
tighten up what you comment on.
Right, and here's the challenge for all Christian organizations. As believers, we recognize that we don't all look at issues exactly the same. Now we should look at it at Christian college, biblical foundation the same. And if you have a problem with, for example, the authority of Scripture, if you have a problem with the supremacy of Christ and these core tenets, then this isn't the place to be teaching because that's not, or working because that's not who we are. But as we work at applying those issues, we're going to have occasionally differences of how we see things. And what we have to do in order to try to be countercultural today is to find loving and constructive and civil ways to have those conversations, while at the same time not promoting something that is a false idea. And that takes wisdom, and it takes a constant care and attention to what we're doing, and an appreciation for the thoughtfulness that's required to lead students well. And so, yes, we have from time to time ideas that someone might say, "Oh, that's a woke idea," and then the question is, well, is it? And if so, what's going on there, and what do we need to address? And we may have to address it. And we're not, again, I tell people, when you're a campus community of, and every headmaster gets this, when you're a campus community of 450 employees, 150 plus faculty, and 2,000 plus students, you're not going to, hit par on every hole. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to, do as well as you can and stick with it to try to maintain a real biblical fidelity. And that's what we're about. And I'm very confident that by God's grace, we have a strong commitment to it.
Yeah. Just as a broad statement, observing, I've only been on campus once, came to meet with the administration. Oh goodness, this goes back probably 10 or 12 years. And it was a wonderful visit, a wonderful campus, but my observations of Grove City are generally through people that have been there and not direct for me. But the thing that I'm impressed with, especially in the year 2023, which is when we're recording this, is the stability and the unwavering commitment to the tenets that began the school 150 years ago. Mm-hmm. That really is an indication, and is commendable today to see that. And I think it really has served you well. And I think that the way that you handle that and the way that that comes into the conversation draws the kind of people that you want to come there and helps impact culture. As you know or may know, our mission is to restore culture to Christ, one young heart and mind at a time. I think you naturally take that kind of mission as well, whether you call it that or not, and really seek to be engaged with culture in an effective way. And yet recognizing that as the world changes, technology and all kinds of things change, the immutability of God creates a stability and a foundation that allows a well-thought plan to begin 150 years ago to remain virtually the same today.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I think there's a lot of consistency between the kind of homes where Veritas Press and curricula go into and where, there's a shelter there. There's, we call sometimes our campus a bubble. But, I think in the world today, you need a time to be bubbled where you are able to learn God's truth well and really be equipped. That's our mission statement, to equip people for their callings through a Christ-centered and academically excellent and affordable living and learning experience. But when they leave that environment, it will be for naught if they haven't been really prepared, right, equipped for what they're going to encounter. And that's on educators today, that is an enormous challenge, because they're going to encounter things that you and I did not encounter when we left our environments in the 70s. And we have to be leaning forward more than ever to try to give them an appreciation for how difficult it will be and how important it'll be to remain faithful in the midst of all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excuse me. I want to change the topic here to something else. At Veritas, we deal with many classical Christian K-12 schools and providing them curriculum and sometimes online classes for them as well. But the overwhelming population that we deal with is the homeschool community, or because they're kind of a little bit the same thing, our online school students. So when somebody's in our online school, the question sometimes comes up, am I homeschooled or am I in school? And the answer is, it depends what you want, because they can be either in the way they look at it. And so there's a homeschooling phenomenon, I don't know if it's growing or not, that looks at trade school compared to college, looks at cost, looks at the students' abilities and interests, sometimes makes the judgment that the time spent and the money spent is not worth it. They ought to just go get a job and start earning a living, so to speak. How do you address that group of people, especially considering the fact that you're a lesser cost option than many other four-year schools?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Marlon, I do think that is a growing trend. I think that because of what we've been talking about regarding wokeism and progressivism in the academy and cost, that more and more voices are being heard to say this model just doesn't seem to be making sense. And so people are looking for something that is just a better return on investment. So I do think there's going to be more and more of a shift to, what do I need to learn in order to be able to make a living, basically. And what we say to that is, that's understandable. We want to help you make a living, but we also think it's more important to help you make a good life. And it's not enough to just earn an income. It's about who you are. And here's the interesting thing about earning an income. The people that excel in the workplace are people that are prepared in a way that is beyond even the technical ability to balance, the books or to, operate some mechanical equipment. It's folks who can connect with other people well, be able to communicate their ideas, be able to bring people together and create a sense of community and collaboration. These are the people that excel, the people who are recognized as leaders. And if you look at 10 years later, 15 years later, they are the bosses, they're the supervisors, they're the people that are actually still, the big influencers. And I think the liberal arts education, the classical ideas, are critically important as a part of the necessary equipment. It would be like an athlete who learns how to do a certain skill, but just doesn't do any strength and conditioning or anything else
That's a great
associated with.
metaphor. I like that because I enjoy athletics and
Yeah,
still work out
yeah,
because
athleticism.
yeah.
And you look at a guy like Jerry Rice or someone who's lasted a long time, and what do they tell you every time? Conditioning, conditioning. It was because I just took great care. I worked really hard in the off season. Yeah, I catch the ball well, but more importantly, I'm an athlete. And I think the idea for liberal arts is, more importantly, I'm a human being who understands what it means to be a human being, so that when I do my work, I'm doing it in a way that is going to be more successful over the long haul. And I think people get that. I think there's going to be a sorting out, and the schools that really accomplish that work are going to be successful, and the schools that don't know what they're talking about there are going to be in real trouble.
That is wonderful. Today, we have had Paul McNulty, the president of Grove City College, with us as our guest on Veritas Vox. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been fun talking to you.
Folks, you've been listening to Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Thanks for being here.